All right, we need to begin. We would like to thank everyone for coming to the Mingham Gallery for another edition of the Speaker Series. Please join us again in 2 weeks on October 24th at 1 o'clock p.m. when our next speaker will be Dr. Heath Ogden, Associate Professor of Biology, whose theme will be Roots of Knowledge and Tree of Life. Today we have the privilege to hear from Dr. Jonathan H. Westover from the Woodbury School of Business, whose lecture is titled The Case for Interdisciplinarity, Finding Unity and Strength Through Valuing Our Academic Diversity. Dr. Jonathan H. Westover is Associate Professor of Organizational Leadership and Ethics in the Woodbury School of Business and Director of Academic Service Learning at UVU, and previously the Associate Director of the Center for the Study of Ethics. He is also a Human Capital Leadership and Performance Management Consultant and is on the board of directors of the HRCI, or HR Certification Institute. He was recently a Fulbright Scholar in Minsk, Belarus, a POSCO Fellow at the East-West Center in Honolulu, Hawaii, and visiting scholar at the Wilson Center in Washington, D.C. He is a regular visiting faculty member in other international graduate business programs for the U.S., United Kingdom, France, Belarus, Poland, and China. He is also a Melissa Nelson Center for Autism Faculty Fellow, a Center for the Study of Ethics Faculty Fellow, a Global Intercultural Faculty Fellow, and a Service Learning Faculty Fellow. He is passionate about teaching, loves to conduct research, and enjoys working with organizations in the community. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Westover.
Thank you. Can everyone hear okay? Okay. I appreciate the introduction. We'll see how this fits here. All right. Now, typically when I have remarks, for example, in the classroom, I'm not particularly tied to slides or notes. Today is going to be very different, and I'm going to be tied to both. So I hope you can humor me as I try to present the remarks that I prepared. I really appreciate everyone who's attending today, and I'm so thrilled to have the opportunity to be here in this wonderful, just beautiful venue. I was so thrilled over the summer when I got contacted by the library staff asking if I'd be interested in participating in this lecture series. I think I had joked with my wife last year when the lecture series, I believe it began last year, and I joked about how excited I was for the lecture series and how cool it would be to have the opportunity to be one of those people. So this is a bucket list item for me. I'm really thrilled. It's such a gorgeous place. As I move forward with my remarks today, of course, they're all geared towards this idea of interdisciplinarity and how important that is in all aspects of our university life here at UVU and more broadly in the academy. And I'm going to delve into some other tangential but related aspects, looking at the nature of work, the value of diversity, looking at aspects of the millennial workforce, the gig economy, and some of those sorts of things that I hope I'll be able to tie back in to the broader remarks of interdisciplinarity. To start, though, I want to tie my remarks into the beautiful artwork that I'm standing in front of today. I want to draw your attention to these three specific panels and groupings of windows. I'm not really a man of favorites, as my wife would attest. She asks me favorites all the time, and I usually don't have an answer because I like lots of different things for lots of different reasons. And the same applies to the roots of knowledge. As I look around at the various windows, I have so many of them that I love for a variety of reasons. But as I was trying to identify some that I wanted to tie my remarks back to today, these were the three that stood out to me that I felt fit well with the theme of interdisciplinarity. So I want to start with panel B, all the way over here, and you can see, of course, on the screen. I'm going to start by providing some initial remarks about these panels. So coursing through each column of the stained glass windows are roots and branches attached to trees at both ends of the series, such as the millennia-old bristlecone pine in column A. The symbolic meaning behind these roots and branches is the interconnection of knowledge originating from both ancient and current sources as it bridges generations across oceans of time. And for that, as a preface to understanding the value that this beautiful artwork provides for us, the roots of knowledge in and of itself is such a great example of interdisciplinary work from the artistic standpoint, but also the interdisciplinarity that went into the experts that consulted on the project, faculty across campus that were part of the research that went into each and every panel, and ultimately what produced this magnificent Roots of Knowledge display. Starting in panel B, we see the depiction of outer space and Earth's place in the universe. Then we see the middle window portrays the genesis of life found on Earth. As we move over to panel G, the middle set of panels, a theme found here is the passage of history and how knowledge is transferred from one generation to the next. At the left is a sunstone, an elaborate solar disk carved in the 15th or 16th century and discovered in 1790 during repairs in Mexico City Plaza, once the site of an Aztec capital. The motifs in this stone connect to creation myths, cataclysmic predictions, and Mesoamerican calendar systems. As we move down into the middle pane, both large structures and small artifacts exhibited in this window confirm the high levels of comparative knowledge shared among the ancients. Also, on the bottom pane, we see a reference to the birth of Buddhism, and in fact, as you take time and look throughout many of the panes in the Roots of Knowledge, you'll see reference to many of the world's great religions. Now, as we move on to panel Y, this setting is a futuristic classroom where the rising generation prepared to inherit a rapidly changing world. The latest digital technology projects the imagery necessary to learn about anatomy, economics, literature, machinery, and mathematics. The limbs from the original tree of knowledge depicted in column B begin to connect to the tree of hope for humanity at the end of the windows. Making up the middle panel, we see a cityscape, and the windows in this window is many authentic buildings, while others are works of imagination conceived by the window's designers and artists to reflect technological advances. And in the bottom pane, we see the park that comes to the water's edge, where we find teachers and grandparents passing on useful knowledge. Objects in architecture that appeared in the early 21st century, such as the gates in Central Park and Beijing National Stadium from the 2008 Olympics, make this scene as current as possible. As one of the last windows, this scene shows the roots come full circle. And again, I'm so just awestruck by the beauty of these panels. And the theme running throughout is the fact that knowledge runs throughout time. And I think we here in the university setting, we played a very important role in continuing that progress and conveying knowledge and innovation to the next generation of our students and society. Now, to switch gears just a little bit, I want to share with you another piece of artwork. This is a painting by Utah artist Christopher Young. It was commissioned by the Utah Academy of Sciences, Arts, and Letters to celebrate its centennial celebration and conference in 2007. Just a little bit about the Utah Academy. Founded on April 3rd, 1908, the Utah Academy of Sciences was organized to promote investigation and diffuse knowledge in all areas of science. The scope of the Academy today includes business, education, engineering, library information and instruction, health, physical education, recreation, engineering, pretty much the grand scope of disciplines. It's been my privilege to serve on the board of the Utah Academy for the past 9 years. I'm currently serving as past president, and for 2 years had the opportunity to serve as president of the Academy. And this piece of artwork beautifully depicts the various disciplines, and artist Christopher Young described the importance of each of these different elements, from music and the humanities to great literature, science, languages, how everything fits together and informs each other to help us better understand the world around us. Currently, the original of this painting is in the art gallery at Dixie State University, and there are copies of this painting at each university across the state of Utah. Our campus has its copy in outside Jeff Olson's office. So if anyone wants to go check it out in the kind of the waiting area in Jeff Olson's office, you can see this painting. And other copies exist, and I enjoy having a copy of this in my home and in my office as well. So these were two examples of interdisciplinarity in art, and I think art, the humanities, music are so vital and important as we try to deal with the challenges that we face in this complex world. Now in academia, working across disciplines doesn't come naturally to us, generally, so we often find ourselves in silos. In fact, it's what we're often teased for, is how we're in our ivory towers and we're stuck in our silos and we can't get out of them. I guess my broad general question is, why should we try and get out of our disciplinary silos? There's certainly value in digging a mile deep and an inch wide as we try to get into the nitty-gritty and the specifics of any given discipline. But perhaps there's also value in going a mile wide and an inch deep, or perhaps both, a mile wide and a mile deep. And so, of course, my bias is that we should try to get out of our silos. Studying a subject in between traditional disciplines is often talked about, but it's not always successfully practiced in reality. Interdisciplinarity, nonetheless, offers a laudable goal to freeing research from silos and enabling new, interesting avenues of research to be undertaken. There are now lots of good examples of research that has been highly successful and would not have been possible without coordination between disciplines or without individuals and groups working across those traditional boundaries. So on this next slide, you'll see an image that you're probably all very familiar with, the story of the blind man and the elephant. I don't think I'm sharing anything new here. I'm sure you've all seen this before and thought about this, but I thought just briefly I would share the story by John Godfrey Sachs, as I think it very well illustrates the necessity for interdisciplinary work. His story reads, "It was 6 men of Industan, to learning much inclined, who went to see the elephant, though all of them were blind, that each by observation might satisfy his mind. The first approached the elephant, and happening to fall against his broad and sturdy side, at once began to bawl, 'God bless me, but the elephant is very like a wall.' The second, feeling a tusk, cried, 'Ho, what have we here? So very round and smooth and sharp, to me 'tis mighty clear. This wonder of an elephant is very like a spear.' The third approached the animal, and happening to take the squirming trunk within his hands, thus boldly up and spake, 'I see,' quoth he, 'the elephant is very like a snake.' The fourth reached out an eager hand and felt about the knee. 'What most this wondrous beast is like is mighty plain,' quoth he, ''tis clear enough the elephant is very like a tree.' The fifth, who chanced to touch the ear, said, 'Even the blindest man can tell what this resembles most. Deny the fact who can? This marvel of an elephant is very like a fan.' The sixth no sooner had begun about the beast to grope, than seizing on the swinging tail that fell within his scope, 'I see,' quoth he, 'the elephant is very like a rope.' As so these men of Industan disputed long and loud and long, each in his own opinion exceeding stiff and strong, though each was partly in the right, all were in the wrong." And of course we can see from this story how important it is to be able to see the forest from the trees. We need, of course, to be able to understand the specifics of whatever we're dealing with in the moment, whatever we happen to be studying, but studying elements in isolation cannot give us a full picture of the challenges and the issues that we're facing. So this is a fun example of why interdisciplinarity is so important. Now, if you'll allow me a little bit of self-indulgence, I thought I would share just a little bit about my own meandering path of interdisciplinary education, and I pose the question, is it a waste of time and resources? And I think there are many in this academic climate, in this political climate, that would suggest that indeed, yes, this was a grand waste of time and resources. We have much debate happening in an ongoing fashion about the value of liberal arts education, for example, degrees to nowhere, and other such discussions. While certainly my path is not the correct path or the best path for everyone, it was a path that worked well for me. And it was a path that I believe has helped me in my efforts to bridge understanding across disciplines. So I thought I would just briefly share with you as an example of what an interdisciplinary background might look like. Now, I was kind of all over the place as a young student. I graduated with 167 credits, which is crazy. My wife graduated with 120.5 credits. She was very intelligent. So I switched majors 4 times. Started in math, I changed to business management, then accounting, and eventually ended up graduating in sociology with minors in management and Korean language. But I had this crazy idea in my mind as a young student that college was about broadening my horizons and better understanding the world around me. That was a crazy thought, I know. But I decided that I really should try to explore and experience different things. So I took so many extra classes that didn't really count for anything. They didn't account for any of my changes in majors, they didn't count for my minors, they ultimately didn't really count for anything. And to be quite honest, if I were to try to recount what I learned in some of those courses, I wouldn't have a clue. I don't remember what I learned in my physics classes, biology, geology, chemistry, astronomy, any of my science courses, but I knew that science was important, and I figured I should try to have some sort of breadth in my education, and if nothing else, it at least gives me an appreciation for these disciplines that I struggle with personally and that I don't have any particular specialty in. Along the way, along the way, I learned a lot about myself. I learned what I was good at, what I wasn't good at. For example, the physical sciences was not my strength. I learned what was interesting to me, what I was passionate about, and ultimately I was able to find a path that would get me to where I wanted to go. But that wasn't obvious for me early on, and it took a lot of meandering. And in fact, I found the main catalyst to me choosing my ultimate degree in sociology was an internship experience that I just kind of happened into. I was minoring in Korean. I had a Korean professor who had connections at LG Electronics in South Korea. He said, "Hey, you want to go work for them for a summer?" I said, "That sounds awesome." He hooked me up, and it just turned out that I was placed in their corporate organizational development and HR department. And after a summer of that, I decided that accounting was really boring and that I needed to do something very different. For anyone who might be in accounting, I love accounting, and accountants are necessary. It just wasn't for me. And ultimately, I wanted to go into organizational development, HR, those sorts of areas. And the university didn't have those programs. And so I talked to my professors, and they said, go do social science. And so that's what I did, and that's why I ended up in sociology. But all of that only happened because I was willing to experiment, to explore, try different things, and ultimately I found something that fit. Eventually I went on and got my master's in public administration, got my PhD, and along the path have tried to embrace my roots, my academic roots in a variety of different disciplines, and try to bring that to the table as I was teaching my courses and conducting research and interfacing with the community. So in part, this has led me to the opportunity to teach a lot of really fun courses. Now here at UVU, in my department, I primarily teach human resource management, organizational development, I teach some ethics, and those are all really great and fun courses. But I also have opportunities to teach at other universities around the world. And these courses are often graduate, master's, or doctoral level courses, and they're almost always interdisciplinary by their nature. So you can see here a list of some of those course titles, and they're just so fascinating and so interesting, and I love having the opportunity to interact with students from around the world in these types of subject matters. So culture, politics, and power, leadership and community, ethics, sustainability, and social impact, social entrepreneurship, developing human capital, organizational development and change, global leadership research, and knowledge creation. In fact, I'm just finishing a course this week in knowledge creation, which is just fascinating and a lot of fun. Okay, so that's enough about me, at least for now. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about what interdisciplinarity is, and perhaps is it the future? Interdisciplinarity involves the combining of two or more academic disciplines into one activity and is about creating something new by crossing boundaries and thinking across them, engaging students and helping them to develop knowledge, insights, problem-solving skills, self-confidence, self-efficacy, and a passion for learning are common goals that educators bring to the classroom, and interdisciplinary instruction and exploration promotes the realization of these objectives. So you can see some of the common benefits of this approach, recognizing bias, thinking critically, learning how to tolerate ambiguity, acknowledging and appreciate ethical concerns across contexts are all among the benefits. Additionally, according to the National Council for Teachers of English, they say that educational experiences are more authentic and of greater value to students when the curricula reflects real life, which is multifaceted rather than being compartmentalized into neat subject matter packages. In their view, real-world problems are so complex, and so no single discipline can adequately describe and resolve these issues. Therefore, they are not surprised that interdisciplinary forms of learning are prevalent and growing in abundance and stature throughout higher education. And of course, I am also not surprised by this as well, and absolutely agree that the complexity of the world's most challenging problems require novel, innovative, interdisciplinary approaches. So under the umbrella of interdisciplinarity, we can also talk about interdisciplinary research. The National Academies in 2004 said interdisciplinary research is a mode of research by teams or individuals that integrates information, data, techniques, tools, perspectives, concepts, and/or theories from two or more disciplines or bodies of specialized knowledge to advance fundamental understanding or to solve problems whose solutions are beyond the scope of a single discipline or area of research practice. So such research is likely to use innovative or even untested methods within the context of the particular project, attempt to develop or test and apply new theory, be carried out by researchers without a proven track record in a particular area, but who may have strong track records in other areas. These projects tend to be complex in terms of management and delivery because of size or the dispersal of research team and field work that needs to be done. Such research is likely to investigate a potentially controversial or sensitive topic, involve multiple or unusual disciplinary combinations, involve accessing or creating data or accessing research participants or other related research materials which previously would never have been considered, and challenging existing paradigms in respect of research ethics. I do a lot of interdisciplinary research myself. In fact, I think all of it would be considered interdisciplinary to some extent at least. But I'm thrilled to currently be involved in two specific interdisciplinary projects on UVU campus. One is an Autism in the Workplace project that I'm working on with a handful of faculty and the Autism Center, as well as individuals in the Woodbury School of Business, as we're trying to understand the challenges that face those on the spectrum in the workplace, how managers and employees alike accommodate or don't accommodate individuals on the spectrum in the workplace, hiring practices, accommodations, all sorts of things like that. And it's been a fantastic project. And the other one involving 6 faculty across campus, across many disciplines, including many hard sciences, is the Rejuvenation of Utah Lake project, and we're actually this week finalizing our National Science Foundation grant proposal, and we'll be submitting that, and so fingers crossed. But the hope and goal is to study all aspects of Utah Lake, the challenges, what's necessary for rejuvenation of the lake, both from a health standpoint, but also from a societal standpoint, a business and economic standpoint, so that we can utilize that resource more fully. So these are just a couple of examples. I'm already telling that I'm a little bit too long-winded, so I'm going to try to speed it up just a little bit. Now, switching gears just a little bit, I wanted to talk about the value of diversity, generally speaking, but also in terms of diversity of thought within the framing of interdisciplinarity. So here you can see the value of diversity through the diversity wheel. In the center, you see those core, more visible diversity dimensions: gender, physical and mental ability, age, and race. In the middle ring, you see the less visible core diversity dimensions: religion and belief, ethnic heritage, social class, sexual orientation. And in the outer ring, you see those secondary dimensions that sometimes are not as easy to see, such as communication style, political beliefs, organizational role, community relationships, health, income, education or training, so on and so forth. Working effectively with others in spite of personal differences is a critical skill in our global workforce. Personal differences are the product of our biological and environmental histories, and they make up our classes, campuses, and cities vibrant. We recognize the importance of cultural, religious, and philosophical differences, and so in a safe, respectful context, we strive to learn more about each other. So for example, in the workforce, we can learn more about our coworkers and how they differ from us. We can improve the workplace morale and productivity, as well as an appreciation for others' backgrounds, and even come to have a better understanding of our own backgrounds and our own personal situation. Like differences in people, differences in ideas are the result of personal history and experience. Unlike people, however, ideas do not have rights based on their existence. Ideas can and should be challenged and explored in a respectful, productive way. Challenging our coworkers' ideas or our colleagues' ideas gives us insight into our own ideas, and fielding questions about our own perspectives drives originality and learning. For exchanges to be productive, they must be respectful. We should ask ourselves some of the following questions. Are you giving the person with whom you're speaking an opportunity to ask questions? Are you processing the person's ideas and allowing them to influence your own? Successful interaction stems from conversations in which the speaker finds a way to combine their unique talents and ideas to solve problems. So the key to capitalizing on differences between people and ideas is to recognize the value of diversity. Forming teams of people with different backgrounds creates an opportunity for novel solutions to flourish, and to flourish in the workplace, in academia, and in the classroom. Now I want to switch gears again just a little bit and share with you one of the Proverbs that I really enjoy. Very early on in my time in South Korea, and in studying the language and the culture, I fell in love with many of their proverbs. And one of the proverbs that's always stuck with me is their frog in a well proverb. And so imagine, this has similar connections to Plato's allegory of the cave. If you're familiar with that, you can think along those lines. But imagine for a moment that you're like a frog that's at the bottom of a well. You're born and raised at the bottom of this well. It's damp, it's cold, it's dark, it's wet. But you're safe, and quite frankly, you don't know any different. Your existence is life at the bottom of a well. When you look up at the night sky or the day sky, you see a narrow pillar of light above you, and to you, that is your world. Now, this is how we're all born into situations like this. We're all born and raised in various types of wells, figuratively speaking. We all are raised with different values, different core assumptions and biases that we use to understand the world around us. As part of the maturing process, that we start to learn that things aren't always as simple as they were when we were children, and we start to recognize that there's more to the world than we had originally conceived. And so this is the process of rising out of the well. Now sometimes when people start to rise out of the well and they get to the top, they're amazed by the beauty of the world around them, the diversity of the landscape, the creatures and the animals that are around them, everything that they see, the vastness of the sky. And sometimes they embrace that, and they can thrive. Other times, people get to the top of the well and they become scared, because quite frankly, life at the bottom of a well is safe, secure. I'm not a marine biologist, but I suspect that frogs at the bottom of a well are fairly high up the food chain. But that, of course, would not be the case once you get out of the well. There'd be lots of natural predators, and so all of a sudden your safety is gone. And so sometimes people revert back to safety. And even though their existence will be limited. They find safety at the bottom of the well. Other times, people very excited about their newfound freedom and their ability to see a broader world around them, they start to jump around, and very quickly they find themselves at the bottom of another well, trading dogma for dogma, and simply replace one set of rigid thinking with another set of rigid thinking. What I would hope for myself, for my family, for my students, is that we can rise out of the well, and that we can find ways to engage and embrace the complexity of the world around us, and take the good, leave the bad, and as we try to find ways of functioning in a messy world. Now, to switch gears just a little bit, the next few slides are regarding the nature of work. So in practical terms, what does this all mean? Why should we care? How does a focus on interdisciplinarity prepare us and our students for the future generally and the future of work specifically? A big chunk of my own research has examined globalization, labor, and the transformation of work over the past 50 years. While I'm not a futurist, though that sounds like a really cool title and surely is a very interesting academic discipline, as a professor of human resource management and organizational leadership, I'm particularly interested in what the future of work will look like. It's my opinion that to be competitive in the future workforce, potential employees will need to be able to sell themselves not just in terms of a particular technical expertise, but also in a broad range of skills that bridge and cross traditional academic disciplines and boundaries. So here in this graphic, you can see some details from a recent study that was performed. I'm going to highlight just a few. Traditional white-collar jobs are now the most at risk of redundancy because of the repetitive nature and predictability means they can be replaced by technology tools in the hands of non-administrators. So many manufacturing and production roles have long been in decline as a result of automation. This is nothing new, but with the rise of artificial intelligence and machine learning, this is extended now to middle management, finance and accounting roles, as well as support staff. Administration, secretarial, receptionist roles are most at risk in many organizations, according to research that was recently performed by people at the firm Harmonics. The Future of Work study, which was carried out by Harmonics in association with OI Global Partners, also set out to find the skills employees must have in order to compete today and the most significant people challenges currently facing organizations. The study found that strong communication skills is the most sought after characteristic by employers, with more than 1 in 2 respondents putting communication followed by leadership agility as their most valued skills in 2017. Eagerness to learn ranked as the 3rd most desirable attribute. Emotional intelligence and ability to recognize, understand, and manage your own and others' emotions also ranked very highly in this research. And there's many other details that you can see as you scan this graphic. Now the next 2 slides are far too complex for me to dive into any great detail here. I simply don't have the time, but they start to get into the future of work and the drivers for the change of the nature of work. So we have, in blue, we have the underlying drivers that then influence the economic structures, that then influence the labor displacement and ultimately the emerging labor landscape. I'll just draw your attention to a handful of these drivers that I think are of particular importance that we really need to consider as we're trying to prepare ourselves and our students for the future. So first, I just mentioned the rise in technology and machine capabilities. I often wonder what work will look like in the next 5 years, let alone the next 10 or 20 years. It's amazing what already can be done through machine learning and artificial intelligence, and it seems to those capabilities seem to be growing exponentially each and every year. So will my job exist in another 10, 20 years? I don't know. I hope so, and I hope that I can differentiate myself and I have enough skill that I can make myself marketable. But that's a question that we all have to ask ourselves. Will we see, with the rise of technology, scenarios such as the Terminator and the rise of the machines, or will we see a situation more utopia-oriented, like Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm not sure. Ultimately, my hope is for the utopia version, that we'll all get to do work that we're really passionate about and interested in, and that we won't be subjected to the machines. But we'll see. But certainly, machine capabilities are changing. Demographics are changing. These have very real impacts on economic structures. Globalization in the interconnected labor force is quickly and dramatically changing the role of consumer demand and the ability of firms to respond to that compartmentalized consumer demand, and ultimately they need agility to respond to that demand, and so the nature of work is changing. Ultimately, it's anyone's guess what the emerging landscape will look like, but my hope is that as we go through a thoughtful process of thinking about it and preparing for it, that we'll be capable of embracing any changes that come our way. This next slide shows another way of conceiving some of the drivers of the future workplace, and also what some of the key skills will be needed in the future workplace. So you have external drivers such as a globally connected world, new media ecology, changing demographics and extreme longevity, and such. But then in the middle, you can see the skills that are going to be needed for the future workers. And these are the things that I want to help my students develop and prepare for. So cognitive load management, virtual collaboration, new media literacy, cross-cultural competencies, sense-making, design mindset, and ultimately transdisciplinarity is highlighted in this study as a primary skill that future workers are going to need to be able to have to be effective. For sake of time, I think I'll skip this next slide, other than to just give a passing note to it, that part of the challenge that we're dealing with is not just economically driven, but it's generationally driven. And the millennial workforce is changing from their direction, also the nature of work and what is desirable, as companies have to try to grapple with how to attract and retain millennial workers. This next slide then reflects something that has been a trend for a while, but ultimately is going to have dramatic implications for all of us, and that is the rise of the gig economy. I'm sure that you've heard this term before. It's kind of a popular term nowadays. Basically, people working outside of traditional job structures, outside of traditional organizations, picking up gig work, picking up project-based work, assignment-based work. This is great for companies because then they have tremendous agility to be able to respond to fluctuations in consumer demand. It's not so great for employees who, with gig work, no longer get benefits, retirement, and other traditional aspects associated with working for a company. So over the last 20 years, you can see a decent rise in gig work, and the pendulum continues to swing that direction. This next slide simply breaks down the type of gig work across the last couple of decades. Independent contractors, temporary help agency workers, on-call workers, workers provided by contract firms, etc. And this becomes even more important as we think about increases in technology and interconnected globalization, that we're not only competing amongst each other for this increasing amount of gig work. About 16% of the workforce is gig work. It's not just us here in Utah County or in Utah or in the US competing for these gig contracts, but we're competing globally for these gig contracts. And there's lots of technical expertise and capabilities in countries around the world, oftentimes where labor costs are significantly cheaper, where companies are already relying on gig workers to complete an increasingly large amount of the work that they need done in their organization. So not only do we have to learn how to deal with artificial intelligence and machine learning, but also the rise of gig work. All right, now I want to get close to finishing up here by talking about a couple examples of interdisciplinarity in practice. The first one is the Horizon 2020 project. With the nature of work continuing to shift in response to a range of social, political, technological, and economic drivers, it's even more imperative that we find ways to break out of our traditional silos and tackle the world's most complex challenges with an interdisciplinary, innovative mindset. So one example is the EU Framework Program for Research and Innovation, called Horizon 2020. This reflects policy priorities of Europe 2020 strategy and addresses major concerns shared by citizens in Europe and elsewhere. The thought is that a challenge-based approach will bring together resources and knowledge across different fields, technologies, and disciplines, including social sciences and the humanities. Funding of these projects, there's a tremendous amount of funding available through Europe 2020. Funding will be focused on the following challenges, and just think about the scope in the complexity of these challenges: health, demographic change, and well-being, food security, sustainable agriculture and forestry, marine and maritime and inland water research, and the bioeconomy, secure, clean, and efficient energy, smart, green, and integrated transportation, climate action, environment, resource efficiency, and raw materials, Europe in the changing world, inclusive, innovative, and reflective societies, and secure societies, protecting freedom and security of Europe and its citizens. These are tremendously huge projects and issues that need to be addressed, and what they are recognizing as that is not possible to address these in any meaningful way within the disciplinary silos. And so while many of these issues that I just raised, many of them sound very hard sciencey, right? Physical sciences, but they're very specifically reaching out and looking for people from the social sciences and from the humanities to help collaborate and be a part of the process of informing each other on how to resolve these challenges and address these problems. Now, the last example I want to share is a personal one, and I do this recognizing that currently North California is burning again. And as of this afternoon, it very well, the current fire in Napa Valley and Northern California very well may have surpassed the scope of this fire that my family was involved with a couple of years ago. But I wanted to tell you take a minute and talk about the Valley Fire from 2015 and talk about the community response and reaction to it and how I think that fits with this idea of interdisciplinarity. And also acknowledging some of the tremendous recent natural disasters, hurricanes, and other horrific events that have happened just recently. There are many times, unfortunately, where our communities are faced with horrible challenges, and we have to figure out how we're going to respond to them. My family had an opportunity to be a part of one of these a couple of years ago. The Valley Fire was a wildfire during the 2015 California wildfire season that started on September 12th in Lake County, California. This is where we were living while I was on sabbatical from UVU. The fire started a little after 1 p.m. the previous day near a small town called Cobb, and by 6:30 p.m. it burned more than 10,000 acres. By Sunday morning, the fire had reached 50,000 acres and had destroyed much of Cobb, Middletown, Whispering Pines, and parts in the south end of Hidden Valley Lake, all different towns. The fire ultimately spread to over 76,000 acres, killed 4 people, and destroyed nearly 2,000 structures. When my family woke up that morning to discover ash-covered vehicles in the driveway, we weren't sure what to expect. The fire had just started a few miles away from where we were living, and we were told to be ready to evacuate. As fate would have it, the fire spread in the opposite direction, so it never actually threatened us. But we were there to see the aftermath of the fire. My children stayed home from school many days as the air quality was terrible, and then we had an opportunity to see the community response. It was really quite the tremendous experience for us to witness firsthand such incredible devastation, entire towns burning to the ground, followed by the remarkable response of the community as everyone pulled together to help those who had lost everything. Everyone, despite their differences, seemed to inherently recognize their bond to those in need, and they showed their love for each other through their direct and sustained service and support in the months that followed the fire. While I was on sabbatical, I also had the opportunity to teach at a small Catholic university that had a satellite campus on the lake, and I was teaching a social entrepreneurship class at the time. We already had our projects, we were about 3 weeks into the semester, we already had our projects planned, and the students were already involved in starting the initial stages of carrying out their community-based projects in this class. But then the fire occurred, and we had our first class following the fire, and unanimously the students voted to scrap our original project ideas and to do something that would help give back to the community. So we had the opportunity to work hand in hand with local, state, and federal agencies as we were trying to understand the resources and get those resources out to understanding the access of resources and getting that information out to the community, as well as put together the starting steps in a disaster response plan, which amazingly the community did not have previously. Just one opportunity in a classroom setting where we were able to do something to respond to a community need that required us to look holistically at the challenges facing the community, not just from a business standpoint, but from a social standpoint, to understand the physical characteristics in aftermath of the fire, ecological issues, challenges, environmental challenges facing the community, as well as business, labor, all those sorts of things as well. So how can we break free of our disciplinary silos? Again, I argue that we need to do this. And in fact, if we truly want to innovate and drive social change, I think it's imperative that we do this. Plainly put, I believe we must connect more, particularly with those who are different than we are. I love traveling, much to the annoyance of my wife, who patiently puts up with me in my travels. But I love meeting new people, experiencing new cultures, challenging my thinking as I try to understand the world from others' points of view. Each of my international travel experiences have taught me new insights about myself and have helped me to develop greater understanding of my fellow citizens across the globe. Many of my long-term travel experiences have given me the opportunity to live amongst and interact with those who have lived their entire lives in vastly different political, economic, and social systems and cultural circumstances. Their views of the world, how they engage in their communities, and even the particulars of their religious faith and belief often vary significantly from what we may be used to here in Utah, yet they learn and grow and seek for community and happiness just like we do. Wherever I go, despite the challenges that I see the inherent goodness in people, some who are like me, but most who are not. To me, all of this is an ongoing lesson in the importance of lifelong learning and sincere contemplative exploration. To not be stuck like a frog at the bottom of a well, but to try to rise out of it. A friend once shared with me the following saying that I adapted a little bit. He said, "The more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. The more I realize I don't know, the more I don't have as much to say as I thought I did. The more I don't have as much to say as I thought I did, the quieter I get. The quieter I get, the more I listen. The more I listen, the more I learn." Ultimately, to drive innovation and social change outside of traditional disciplines requires us to connect, and it requires us to get quieter and listen more and strive to work collaboratively. So to close, I wanted to share 10 strategies for increasing our creativity and innovation through interdisciplinary thinking. Number one, truly creative people have developed their ability to observe and to use all of their senses, which can get dull over time. So we need to take time to take everything in and to sharpen our blade. Number two, innovation is based on knowledge. Therefore, you need to continually expand your knowledge base. You need to read things that you don't normally read, talk to people you don't normally talk to, and experience things you don't normally experience. Number three, your perceptions may limit your reasoning. Be careful about how you're perceiving things. In other words, we should learn to defer judgment and learn to take more in before we pass judgment. Number four, practice guided imagery so that we can see holistically a concept come to life and see how it can flow moving forward. Number 5, let your ideas incubate by taking a break from them. One of the best things you can do is to take a break. It shifts your brain into another place and helps you to be more innovative and creative. Number 6, experience as much as you can. Exposure puts more ideas into your subconscious. Actively seek out new experiences to broaden your experience portfolio. Number 7, treat patterns as part of the problem. Recognizing a new pattern is very useful, but be careful not to become part of it. Number 8, redefine the problem completely. Remember that if the problem that we currently conceive is the actual problem, there probably is another problem. There's probably a deeper problem. When you define the real problem, you can solve it and move on. After all, if you'd already correctly defined the problem, you probably would have solved it a long time ago. Number 9, look where others aren't looking to see what others aren't seeing. And number 10, come up with ideas at the beginning of the innovation process and then stop. Many times we come up with many ideas, we start innovating, we start collaborating, and then we just keep churning our wheels, and we never actually get anything done because we never get into the implementation. So we need to work really hard on the execution part of innovation. The more creative and innovative that we are with our teams, the more long-term success that we can achieve. So just chasing the next grand big idea isn't necessary. Oftentimes we just need to bring an interdisciplinary approach to our current processes and seeking understanding. If we can do this, then we can become regarded as an industry innovator, one that others will try to copy. So my hope is that we can do more interdisciplinarity. We can help our students to develop knowledge, insights, problem-solving skills, self-confidence, self-efficacy, and passion for learning. We can help them learn to recognize their biases, to think more critically, to tolerate ambiguity, and to acknowledge and appreciate a diverse world with complex ethical concerns. Thank you, and we don't have a lot of time, but the remainder of the time I'm happy to answer any questions. Yes.
Do you give your students assignments and have them use disciplines that overlap and give presentations in your class?
I try to incorporate this as much as I can into the classroom. One of the things I feel very strongly about is giving students the opportunity to do community-based, real-life community-based projects. Which inherently, by their nature, require them to look at problems from a variety of angles. So for example, in my organizational development class, we take on real-life consulting challenges in community organizations. Organizational development itself is a very interdisciplinary subject, a very interdisciplinary field that draws upon many of the social sciences, and so trying to help the students understand those different aspects and different types of data, different research approaches that they can utilize within an organizational setting to understand and then respond to organizational challenges is a core part of the course and a core part of the projects that they do in that class. So it's definitely an effort and something I want to do more of, and I think a great opportunity for students. When we talk about, some of the aspects I specifically mentioned, like ability to deal with ambiguity, this kind of an approach to a team-based, community-based project inherently becomes messy and complicated and unpredictable, and it requires students to learn how to navigate ambiguity. And so I think that's one of the great values of doing those types of course projects. One of many valuable outcomes. Yeah.
How many of your students will be teaching in a public setting or maybe at a university, would you guess?
Oh, I don't know. If we're talking about formal education as school teachers or professors, I would suspect probably a fairly small number, but some will. But informally, I'm sure that many or most of them will have opportunities to teach in other capacities, in community involvement in organizations, religious service, certainly in their homes, but also in organizational settings, as managers, leaders in companies, they'll have many opportunities to teach. And so I hope that one of my greatest desires is that students will get a little glimpse at the necessity of taking a holistic view of challenging problems and try to tackle things from that perspective as opposed to really more narrow perspectives. That's my hope. You had a question? Yes.
When you talk about people getting outside of their silos, is that a movement toward despecialization, where people are less specialized in a specific area, or do they only partially venture outside of the silos and bring back what they learned? Their areas of expertise.
I think mostly the latter.
Yeah, it just seems like if it were taken to extremes, then it'd be jack of all trades, masters of none. That type of scenario where nobody is really a specialist anymore.
Yeah, and I don't think it needs to be a mile wide and an inch deep or a mile deep and an inch wide. It can be somewhere in between, right? And that's what I would argue for. So in part, I would say the latter, that we get out there, we get exposure, and we bring things back, or we work on collaborative teams. But in part, it's the former because, again, with the changing nature of work and the rise of the gig economy, what you see is individuals that have kind of transferable skill sets. So they have maybe technical expertise in a few areas, but then they have other soft skills that can be utilized across a variety of different places. And that is probably a little bit more of what you described at first, where they're a little bit of become a jack of all trades as they try to apply, their experience and their skills across various contexts. So I think there's a little bit of both happening. But within academia, for example, the trend is clearly more towards specialization, not, despite the discussions about interdisciplinary work and interdisciplinarity, the trend is definitely towards greater specialization, which again serves an important role, but I think it's limited in solving some of the world's greatest challenges. Yes?
You talked about a growing workplace and how companies need to adapt. But I was wondering what advice you would give to the millennials that need to adapt to this workplace as well.
So part of the changing nature of work is driven from the employer side, trying to save costs, right? So they want labor costs low, so they want more contract workers, independent contractors, more gig workers that they don't have to pay full salary and benefits to. It keeps them more agile. And that's been a trend that's been happening for a long time, and the pendulum keeps swinging that direction. But then from the other side, you have millennials who actually, not universally of course, but increasingly more so than previous generations, they actually desire gig work. They really like the flexibility, not being tied down to an 8 to 5 traditional day job. They're not so worried about healthcare and retirement and some of those things that are seen as very, out there way in the future. And so they're happy to just pick up work as they go and kind of develop their portfolio of skills around what they're able to do. So that it's being driven, I think, from both directions, but ultimately the reality is that we just see a much greater amount of gig work happening now, and I think millennials are playing a really big part of that. One thing that I think will be interesting to see to kind of counterbalance that trend is that we also are demographically, we're seeing the retirement, the moving of the baby boomers out of the workforce, and so the fight for talent is becoming fiercer and fiercer, and it will continue to for the next decade. And our company's going to get away with offering increasing amounts of gig work as opposed to traditional types of employment arrangements. If millennials are happy with gig work, then they probably will get away with it because millennials are going to make up the largest proportion of the workforce. If millennials decide that they're not okay with that and they want more traditional, stable types of employment arrangements, then I think companies are going to have to, the pendulum will have to swing back a bit just in order to attract and retain good talent. So I'm not sure if that exactly addressed your question. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate your being here.